Some fathers get a phone call in the middle of the night that changes everything. I got 5 days of nothing, and that silence nearly broke me before my own sons ever said a single word to my face. You want to know what it feels like to love someone so much it turns into a sickness. It feels like standing at your kitchen counter at 3 in the morning, staring at a phone that refuses to ring, convinced your own child is lying in a ditch somewhere in the Arizona desert. That was me, 54 years old, gripping a mug of cold coffee so hard my knuckles had gone bloodless, waiting for two grown men to pick up a telephone. My name is Walter Briggs. I run Ironclad Medical Systems out of Coldwater Ridge, Minnesota, a company that services and calibrates the machines hospitals cannot function without: dialysis units, ventilators, imaging scanners, the equipment that hums quietly in the background while it keeps people alive. I built that business with my own 2 hands, and I built it so my boys would never once know what it felt like to go without. My own father never got that chance to build anything for me. He was a Marine, and he shipped out for a deployment when I was 9 years old. He never came home. Nobody ever taught me how to throw a football. Nobody sat me down and told me I mattered. So when Marcus was born, and then Trevor 2 years after him, I made myself a promise, standing in a hospital corridor in Coldwater Ridge. These boys will never know that particular kind of empty. I kept that promise for 26 years. Then, on a Wednesday in early June, it turned into the worst 5 days of my life. Welcome back. Keep this in mind while you listen. The people in this story had every chance to do right by the people who loved them. They chose otherwise instead. If you're new here, hit subscribe and drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from. Trust me, you're going to want to stick around for this one. It started with a letter. Dual. Official. The kind you skim over breakfast and forget by the time you've finished your eggs. Notice of lease renewal. Guarantor verification required. Marcus's apartment, that glass-walled unit at Desert Vista Towers with the mountain view balcony he loved to brag about. I'd co-signed that lease 2 years earlier, when he landed his first real job out in Scottsdale. My name, my credit, my signature. Holding the arrangement up like a support beam, nobody notices until it isn't there anymore. The renewal was due in 6 days. Before I could sign off on it, I needed one quick answer from Marcus, a detail about his income documentation the property office wanted cleared up. A 30-second phone call. Nothing more. I dialed him from my office, leaning back in my chair, half watching a technician recalibrate a portable ultrasound unit through the glass partition. Straight to voicemail. Fine. Probably in a meeting. I left a message. Hey, it's Dad. Got your lease renewal paperwork here. Need to verify something before I sign it. Give me a call when you get a minute. No big deal. I went back to work. By the next afternoon, nothing. I tried again. Voicemail again. That's when the first flicker of unease showed up. He's never once ignored me for a full day. So I called Trevor, figuring he'd know where his brother had gotten to. Voicemail. Both of them. Same day. I told myself it was nothing. Young men get busy. They forget. I left another message, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. Guys, I really need to hear back from one of you. It's about Marcus's lease. Deadline's coming fast. Denise noticed something was wrong with me that night at dinner. My wife has known me for 31 years. She can read a shift in my face before I've even felt it myself. You've barely touched your lasagna, she said, nodding at the dish our neighbor Mrs. Alvarez had dropped off. What's going on with you? The boys aren't answering, I said. Either of them. Since yesterday. She waved it off. They're busy. Walter. They're grown men. She was right. I knew she was right. So why did my stomach feel like it was folding in on itself? Day 3 of silence is when it stopped being annoying and started being terrifying. The lease deadline was now 3 days out. I called Marcus 9 times that day. 9. I called Trevor 6 times. Every single one died in a voicemail box. I stopped eating properly. I stopped sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw wrecked cars on desert highways. 2 state troopers standing on my porch, hats in their hands. I swear I could hear the words before they'd even said them. You've already lost a father once. Walter, you know exactly how fast this world can take somebody. Quiet. Sudden. Nobody ever warns you first. That night I sat on the edge of the bed at 1 in the morning, thumb hovering over Marcus's name for what felt like the 100th time. Denise sat up behind me. Walter, come to bed. Something's wrong. Denise. My voice cracked in a way I hadn't heard from myself since my own father's memorial service. 5 days. Neither one of them. That's not busy. That's not normal. Maybe they're together. Maybe their phones died. Both phones. For 5 straight days. I turned to look at her. And I watched it land on her face too, that same cold drop in the stomach. Pack a bag. I said, we're flying out there. Something's wrong. I can feel it. She didn't argue with me. That's the thing about 31 years of knowing somebody. You learn which fights are worth having, and which ones you just get up and pack a bag for. We booked the first flight out of Minneapolis, St. Paul the next morning. I remember standing at the gate thinking, this might be the worst decision I've ever made, or it might save their lives. I had no idea which. Denise held my hand the entire flight. Neither of us said much. I hope our sons aren't dead doesn't exactly make for good small talk with a flight attendant handing out pretzels. I kept running scenarios through my head like some sick highlight reel. A car accident on the interstate. Trevor, on that dirt bike he swore he'd sold. None of it prepared me for what was actually waiting behind that door. We landed in Phoenix just after 2 in the afternoon. The heat hit us like an open oven. The moment we stepped off the jet bridge, that thick desert heat Minnesota people never fully get used to. I rented a Chevrolet Tahoe, tossed our one bag in the back, and pointed us toward Scottsdale. The whole drive. Denise kept repeating the same thing, like she was trying to convince herself. They're fine. There's probably some boring explanation. Then why won't they pick up the phone, I said, gripping the wheel tighter than I needed to. 5 days. 15 calls between us. Not one text back. She went quiet after that. I think some part of her already knew. The same way I knew a boring explanation wasn't waiting on the other side of that building. Marcus's building rose up out of the Scottsdale skyline like something lifted from a real estate magazine glass. Brushed steel. 22 stories of polish that made a guy from Coldwater Ridge feel out of place in his own rental. I pulled up to valet. And even that felt wrong. Handing off a Tahoe in a line of sports coupes like I was crashing somebody else's life. We rode the elevator up to the 9th floor in silence. My hand was actually shaking when I raised it to knock. 26 years of fatherhood. And I was standing outside my own son's door like a man about to identify a body. Then I heard it. Music. Laughter loud. Easy. Celebratory. The kind you never hear in hospitals or morgues. Balloons taped beside the door frame, bobbing every time somebody inside walked past a vent. That's not the sound of tragedy, I thought. And for 1 half-second relief flooded through me so hard, my knees nearly buckled. Thank God they're okay. I knocked. The music dipped. Footsteps. The latch clicked. And the door swung open to reveal my oldest son. Marcus. Drink in hand. A grin frozen halfway between surprise and something far colder. Something I hadn't seen since he was a teenager, caught sneaking in past curfew. That grin didn't stay confused for long. It curdled into something else entirely. And in the half second before he opened his mouth, some part of me, the part that had spent 5 sleepless nights terrified my son was dying somewhere, already knew. I hadn't flown 2,000 miles to save my boys from tragedy. I'd flown straight into an ambush I never saw coming. You ever have a moment where your whole body knows something terrible is about to happen half a second before your brain catches up? That's exactly where I was standing. 9th floor. Scottsdale. My hand still hovering near the doorframe. Marcus stood there, drink sweating in his hand. And that grin didn't just fade, it curdled like milk left out too long in that desert heat. What are you guys doing here? Not Dad. Not Mom. Not even, is everything okay? Just what are you guys doing here? Like we were a pair of door-to-door salesmen he'd have to figure out how to get rid of. I tried to keep my voice steady even though my whole chest felt like it was folding in on itself. I've been calling. You didn't answer. I thought something happened to you. Denise pushed past me a step, hands flying to her mouth. And for 1 second, just one, I watched 31 years of motherhood pour out of her all at once. Oh, thank God, she gasped. Son, you're okay. We've been calling for 5 days straight. We were sick with worry. We thought something terrible. Marcus cut her off before she even finished the sentence. He rolled his eyes, not a small eye roll either. A full, dramatic, exhausted. I can't believe I have to deal with this eye roll. The kind children give you when you ask them to take out the trash. We didn't answer because we didn't want to talk to you. His voice came out sharp. Flat. Final. Stop calling us. We have our own lives. You're suffocating us. Just stay on your own. Stay on your own. 4 words. I've been hit by a lot of things in my life. A falling garage door once. A rogue equipment cart that got away from a technician. My own father's absence for 45 straight years. None of it landed the way those 4 words landed. I stood there in the hallway. Balloons bobbing behind Marcus's head like the whole building was mocking me. And I genuinely did not know what to say. 26 years, every ball game. Every scraped knee. Every 2 a.m. fever. And this is the return. Before I could find words, a young woman stepped up beside Marcus, holding a glass of something pale and bubbly. Her whole posture radiating a kind of smug exhaustion I'd only ever seen on reality television. Honestly, she said, crossing her arms. It's too much. Do you guys ever stop hovering? Denise blinked at her, completely lost. I'm sorry, who are you? The girl's smile widened. She raised her left hand. Slow. Deliberate. Like she was presenting evidence in a courtroom. A ring caught the hallway light and threw it right back into our faces. I'm Brooke, she said, his fiancée. And today is our engagement party, which you are currently ruining by showing up uninvited. Uninvited. Ruining. I heard the words land. But for a second they didn't fully register. Like my brain had refused delivery on a package it already knew would hurt too much to open. Our son. Engaged. And we found out about it standing in a hallway. Being told we were ruining it. 31 years of marriage. And I had never once seen Denise look the way she looked in that moment, like someone had reached into her chest with a bare hand. I want to pause right here, because this is the part where people who've never lived it would say, Walter, just walk away. Some part of me was already halfway to the elevator in my head. But another part of me, the part that had flown 2,000 miles because I believed my sons might be in danger, needed to understand. How does a father go from he's calling because he loves us to he's suffocating us without a single conversation in between? I found out real quick. That was the moment that actually broke me. I'd tell Denise later on the plane, it wasn't the insults. Wasn't the entitlement. Wasn't even that girl's smug little smile. It was knowing my sons had seen my name light up their phones. They saw me calling. They knew I was worried sick. And they chose to let me suffer for 5 straight days. That's not independence. That's cruelty with a return address. But that came later, right there in the hallway. All I had was a mouth gone dry and a wife quietly falling apart beside me. Behind the heartbreak. Though, there was something else Denise hadn't said out loud yet, though I knew exactly what she was thinking. Because I was thinking it too. Back home, tucked in our fireproof safe, was her grandmother's heirloom ring, carried out of a small village in Italy, stitched into the hem of a traveling dress. 23 years Denise had kept that ring polished, dreaming of the day she'd slide it onto the finger of whatever woman our son chose to marry. Instead, she was standing in a hallway in Scottsdale, being treated like an intruder at a party, celebrating a ring that wasn't even hers to give. Trevor appeared in the doorway right about then, carrying a tray of what smelled like grilled street corn and carne asada, and groaned the second he saw us. Actually groaned, like we were a chore he'd thought he'd finished. "Are you serious right now?" He set the tray down on a side table hard enough to rattle the plates. "You guys couldn't just let us have this one day." I felt something steady itself inside me right then. Fear was turning into something else. I don't know if it was anger yet, maybe just clarity. "Sown," I said, keeping my voice level. "I didn't come here to ruin anything. Your landlord sent an urgent notice. Your lease renewal deadline is in 3 days. And because I'm the primary guarantor, I needed to verify a detail before I signed it. So you don't lose this place. I called your brother. Then I called you. Neither of you answered for 5 days." Trevor let out a laugh short, mocking. The kind of laugh that carries no actual humor. Just contempt wearing humor's jacket. "Oh, here we go again. The savior complex." He shook his head slowly, like he was talking to a child instead of the man who'd been co-signing his rent. "You think because you signed a piece of paper, you get to track our every move. This is exactly why we both picked colleges 1,000 miles from home. We chose our schools just to get away from your constant, suffocating help. 1,000 miles on purpose to get away from me. I flew 2,000 miles because I loved them too much to sit still. They moved 1,000 miles because they loved me too little to stay close." Marcus nodded along, like his brother had just delivered a TED Talk, then leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, drink still in hand. "Exactly. You always use money and fixing things just to keep tabs on us and feel important. I pay my own rent now, with my own job. I don't need you hovering over me, acting like a hero." He paused. "And here's the part that really cracked something open in my chest. We saw your calls. We purposely didn't answer. We wanted to see how long it would take for you to finally get the hint and stay on your own. Purposely. Not we were busy. Not our phones died. For 5 days I sat awake picturing every possible danger they could be in, while my sons watched my name light up their screens and decided, on purpose, to let their own father suffer just to teach him a lesson." Brooke tossed her hair back, bored of the whole exchange. "Yeah, we're trying to celebrate our future with people who actually matter. We don't need your old-fashioned drama here." She gestured toward the elevator, like she was shooing off a delivery driver. "Please leave." In my own son's doorway, by a woman I'd met 4 minutes earlier. "I want you to understand something about me, because it matters for what comes after." I didn't yell. I've thought about that since, whether some part of them needed to see me break the way they'd just broken their mother. But that's not who I am. My own father never got the chance to teach me how to handle a moment like that. So I had to figure it out myself. I looked at the 2 boys I had poured my entire life into, the boys I'd vowed to protect the moment I first held them. Because I knew exactly what it felt like to grow up without someone protecting you. They stood there in a lifestyle my signature and credit had built, completely blind to it, treating their own mother like something to be swept off the doorstep. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just reached over, gently took my sobbing wife's hand, and turned toward the elevator. Behind us, I heard Brooke mutter something to Marcus. I didn't catch the words. And honestly, I didn't need to. The tone said enough. They wanted to be on their own. And tomorrow, they were going to get exactly what they'd asked for. If you've been listening for a while, drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button while you're at it. And make sure you're subscribed. The elevator ride down felt longer than the flight from Minneapolis. Denise stood beside me, silent, staring at the mirrored doors, tears running steady down her face without a sound. I'd seen my wife cry plenty of times in 31 years, but never like that. Silent, hollow, like something inside her had simply stopped working. We didn't talk in the lobby. We didn't talk in the Tahoe on the way to the airport, even though I kept glancing over, waiting for her to say something. Anything, just so I'd know she was still in there. She finally spoke somewhere around the freeway on-ramp, staring out at the passing saguaros like they might have an answer for her. 23 years, she said quietly. I kept that ring polished for 23 years. Walter. I didn't ask which ring. I already knew. I used to imagine the day I'd give it to her. She went on, voice cracking. Whoever he chose. I imagined telling her the story behind it. My grandmother coming over from Italy with nothing but that ring sewn into the hem of a dress. I don't know what I imagined. Not that. Her hands were shaking in her lap. Not being told I'm ruining a party I didn't even know was happening. What do you say to that? What is there to say? I reached over and took her hand off her lap, held it the rest of the drive, and neither of us said another word until we were sitting at the gate waiting to board. The flight home was the quietest 2.5 hours of my life. Denise stared out the window, watching the desert shrink beneath the clouds, tears slipping down every few minutes like her body had given up trying to stop them. I held her hand and said nothing. What was there to say? They didn't mean it, no. They meant every word. They'd planned it, watched the calls come in, and chosen silence on purpose. 26 and 23 years old is not a phase. That's a decision made in full daylight with a fiancé cheering him on. I just held her hand and let the silence say what neither of us had the strength to say out loud yet. Somewhere over Kansas, staring at the seat back in front of me, something shifted inside my chest. Quiet, but permanent, like a door closing somewhere deep in a house you thought you knew every room of. I gave them everything I never had. And somehow, in giving them all of that, I built two men who look at me like I'm the villain in their story. 26 years. And this is the return. By the time we touched down in Minneapolis, something in me had already made a decision, even though I didn't have words for it yet. I just knew the man walking off that plane wasn't the same one who'd boarded, terrified for his sons' lives. Hours earlier, that man was gone, and whatever was left of him was about to make a phone call his sons would remember for the rest of their lives. They wanted to be left alone, so I left them alone legally, financially, and completely. And by the time they figured out what that actually meant, it was already too late to undo it. You know what nobody tells you about heartbreak? It doesn't announce itself right away. It waits. It lets you walk through your own front door first. Lets you set your bags down. Lets you think, for one merciful second, that maybe the worst of it is behind you. And then it takes your wife's legs right out from under her. We walked into our house in Coldwater Ridge a little after 10 that night, and the silence hit us differently than it ever had before. 28 years in that house. Countless nights coming home from Little League games and school plays, and that night, the quiet had teeth. Denise made it 2 steps past the front hall before her knees just gave out. She went down onto the living room floor. Right there on the rug, her mother had given us as a wedding gift. And she cried the way you cry when someone dies. Not the composed, dignified crying she'd done in a hallway in front of strangers. The real thing. The kind that comes from somewhere underneath your ribs. I stood there watching her. And something in my chest cracked clean open. 31 years of marriage. And I'd never once felt this helpless. I got down on the floor with her. Didn't try to fix it. Which, if you know me, is a small miracle. Since fixing things is the only language I've ever known, I just held her while she cried, and let myself ask the question that had been chasing me since we left Arizona. Where did we go wrong? I said quietly. More to myself than to her. I gave them everything I never had. I was there for every moment. I was the father I always wished for. And somehow, in doing that, I turned them into people who look at me like I'm the enemy. Denise lifted her head, eyes red and swollen, and said the only thing that made any sense that whole night. No, Walter, you didn't turn them into anything. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. They did that themselves. You just handed them a life they never had to work for. And people who never work for something never learn to be grateful for it. I held my wife on that living room floor until almost midnight. And somewhere in there, I made myself a promise. The only person who had stood by me through every single version of my life, good, bad, terrified, exhausted, was lying right there in my arms. My boys had their own lives now. They'd made that painfully, deliberately clear. So I decided right then that I was going to honor that wish and spend whatever time I had left loving the one person who had actually earned it. We didn't sleep much that night. We really talked. The kind of conversation 31 years of marriage lets you have without explaining half of it. We agreed on one thing above all, whatever happened next. We'd move together. No solo decisions. No guilt trips softening either of us. By sunrise, we were aligned. And Walter Briggs, aligned with his wife, is not a man you want standing between you and a telephone. I called my lawyer, Dennis Okafor, at exactly 8:02 the next morning. He picked up on the second ring. The man's handled Ironclad Medical's contracts for 12 years and knows when I'm calling about business versus something else entirely. This was clearly something else. Walter, he said, you sound like a man who didn't sleep. I need you to pull my name off Marcus's lease guarantee today, before the renewal window closes. There was a pause on the line, the kind of pause a good lawyer gives you when he wants to make sure you're not about to do something you'll regret by lunchtime. You sure about that? Once that renewal lapses without your backing, the property management system is going to flag it automatically. No warning period. No grace window on a place like that. I've never been more sure of anything, I said. Dennis didn't argue further. By 9:15, the withdrawal was filed. By noon, it was processed. The renewal deadline came and went at midnight with no signature attached to it. Because for the first time in 2 years, there was no Walter Briggs standing behind that lease like an invisible steel beam. Nobody ever thanks the beam. They wanted to prove they didn't need me hovering over their lives. I decided to give them the closest thing to proof a man in my position could offer. I didn't hear anything for 2 days, which felt almost funny given everything that had just happened. The same silence that had nearly destroyed me a week earlier now felt like the most peaceful 2 days I'd had in months. The call came on a Friday afternoon. I was in my office reviewing a service contract renewal with a hospital network out in Duluth when my phone buzzed with Marcus's name on the screen. I let it ring twice before I picked up. Dad. His voice came out tight. Clipped the sound of a man, trying very hard to sound calm and failing. Dad. There's some kind of mistake with the lease. The building manager says the renewal didn't go through because there's no guarantor. They just served us an official notice to vacate. And they're hitting us with a non-compliance penalty that doubles our rent for the next 10 days until we're out. There's no mistake. Son, I said, keeping my voice level, almost gentle. I withdrew as guarantor 2 days ago. Dead silence on the line. You what, Dad? Why would you do that? You know I can't qualify on my own income yet. If they file an official eviction, it goes on my public record. My credit will be destroyed. Brooke and I won't be able to rent a storage unit in this city. You told me to stay on my own. I said, so I am. Dad, please, you have to call them back. Tell them it was a mistake. It wasn't a mistake. Marcus, I'll talk to you soon. I hung up. They didn't wait for the sheriff to come throw them out. They couldn't afford a formal eviction on their names. I heard the details later. Secondhand. Through a friend of Trevor's. Marcus and Brooke spent 48 straight hours stuffing clothes into duffel bags. Security just watched them pack. Standing near the elevator, while Marcus wheeled his own life out of that glass tower on a luggage cart. Passing through the same lobby where, weeks earlier, they'd told his mother she was ruining their engagement party. There is a quiet clarity in watching natural consequences finally arrive at a door that had been propped open by my signature for far too long. Because here's the thing, nobody tells you about being a fixer your whole life the moment you stop fixing. The world doesn't collapse. It just becomes honest again. I didn't stop there. Over the following week, I looked at every other financial thread tying my name to theirs. You can't cross your name off a co-signed loan with a pen, but you can force the bank's hand. I called our account manager at the institution that held Marcus's side business line of credit secured by my company's assets and revoked the authorization for him to use my collateral. The bank froze his business draw and demanded new security within 30 days. Next, I called the lender on Trevor's pickup truck and informed them in writing that, as co-senior, I was refusing to cover any future delinquencies. With Trevor's credit score alone a disaster, the bank flagged the loan high risk and demanded an immediate restructure. I didn't do any of it with anger. I just let the banks do what they do best. Look at my son's actual worth without my shadow covering them. They'd asked to be on their own. I was letting the banks show them exactly what that meant. They showed up on our porch about 4 weeks later. They didn't have a choice. Scottsdale had chewed them up and spit them out the second my money vanished. Marcus's side business collapsed without the line of credit, and with no glass tower to live in. They packed a budget rental box truck and drove 20 hours straight back to Minnesota. They didn't call first. They just pulled that box truck right up to our curb in Coldwater Ridge, looking like two ghosts of the successful men they'd thought they were. Trevor was the one doing the knocking, hard and fast, his face pale and furious, pounding on the door like it owed him an apology. I opened it, let them in, sat them down in the living room, the same room where Denise had collapsed weeks earlier, and let them say whatever they'd driven 20 hours straight from Arizona to say. Marcus went first, crying before he even got through the doorway. Real tears this time. Though it took me a minute to remember that real tears don't automatically mean real accountability. How could you do this to us? His voice broke on every other word. We're your family. You're ruining our lives over a small argument. Small argument, I asked, my voice empty of emotion. You watched your mother and me call for 5 days straight while we were sick with worry. You ignored us on purpose to teach me a lesson. Now the world is teaching you one. Marcus's grief curdled fast into something uglier, desperate panic. You're just a control freak who wants to see us fail, he screamed. This is a sick revenge plot because we didn't invite you to a party. I didn't flinch. I don't want to see you fail, son. But you told me you didn't need me hovering, acting like a hero. I'm honoring your wish. If you truly don't need me, you don't need my name on your apartment, my collateral, or my signature on your debt. That's not revenge. That's adulthood. Marcus's jaw tightened, searching for another angle. Mom would never have let this happen, he said, pivoting hard. You're punishing us because you're bitter. That's when Denise stepped into the room from the kitchen doorway. Arms crossed. Voice steady in a way I hadn't heard from her since before that hallway in Scottsdale. Your dad and I are on the same page, she said. Firm. Solid. Not a single crack in it. We talked about this together. We both agreed to honor your wish to be left alone. Trevor, who'd been quiet up to that point, finally cracked. Mom, you can't be serious. I stood up from my chair, walked over, and put my hand gently on Denise's shoulder. So here we are, I said. We're leaving you alone. Good luck. I watched something in both of their faces finally really understand that this wasn't a phase, wasn't a bluff. There wasn't a father who'd caved the second his sons cried hard enough in his living room. I listened to them cry and blame me for their own mess. They tried to make me feel guilty for their eviction, for their financial collapse, for every choice they themselves had made. But I felt nothing but clarity. These were the same boys who'd stood in a doorway and told me I was suffocating them. These were the same boys who'd broken their mother's heart without so much as a flinch. They didn't want my help when I was offering it freely. They just wanted someone to blame once they realized they couldn't do it alone. They left that night without another word. I heard the truck door slam outside, heard the engine fade down the street, and Denise and I stood in that living room in a silence that, for the first time in weeks, didn't feel like grief. It felt like peace. I went to see Dennis Okafor again the following week. This time it wasn't about a lease. I want to rewrite the trust, I told him, sliding my coffee aside to make room for the folder he'd brought. Completely. He looked up at me over his glasses, the same careful look he'd given me the day I pulled Marcus's guarantee. How completely? If I die first, everything goes to Denise. If she dies first, everything comes to me. And if we're both gone, I paused. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something settle in my chest instead of tear through it. $0 go to the boys. Instead, there are charities that fund scholarships for children of fallen service members. Kids whose fathers shipped out and never came home. Kids who'd give anything just to have a father call them once and actually mean it. That's where it goes. All of it. Dennis didn't ask me to reconsider. He just nodded, made the note, and got to work. My own father was taken from me by a deployment that never ended the way it should have. I grew up without him, and I swore my children would never know that ache. Somehow, in giving them everything I never had, I raised two boys who took a loving father for granted. My boys don't need my money, they've made that clear. But there are kids out there, real kids with a folded flag on a mantle somewhere, who'd trade almost anything for a father to call and mean it. My legacy isn't going to the sons who pushed me out of a doorway in Scottsdale. It's going to the children who'd give anything to have a father worth calling. Months passed. The calls from Marcus and Trevor slowed, then stopped altogether. I heard through an old family friend that they'd moved into a smaller place together, outside the city, no more mountain views. Learning the hard way what a monthly budget looks like when your name isn't backed by somebody else's signature. I won't lie and tell you it didn't sting. It did. Some nights it still does. But every time that ache creeps in, I remember the hallway. I remember stay on your own. I remember my wife's face falling apart over a ring that never got its moment. And the ache settles back down where it belongs. Denise and I sit on our back porch most evenings now, coffee in hand, Watching the sky fade over the same backyard where two boys once learned to ride bikes, I'd stayed up half the night assembling. She reached over one evening and put her hand on mine, the way she's done 1,000 times over 31 years. And I realized something simple and true. My father died when I was 9. I spent my whole life trying to be the man he never got the chance to become. But somewhere along the way, I forgot that the only person I truly needed to protect was the woman sitting right beside me the entire time. My boys have their own lives now. They made that crystal clear standing in a doorway in Scottsdale. And my wife and I, we have each other. And that, it turns out, is more than enough. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment below. Let me know where you're watching from.